You're going to read the book, you're going to do your quiz, and now we are going to go straight into chapter 4, which is about intimate relationships, right? Well, this is the psychology piece. So let me get out of this one and share this one. Right, so intimacy is what differentiates us, right? Of course, there are animals that have families that live in a family structure. There are packs or families where there are emotional attachments to the other members of your pack, or whatever it is term is for depending on the animal, right? But there are certainly emotional attachments, but most people don't believe it's involved around procreation or the sexual act of procreation for the animals, whereas for human beings, that's a little bit different. All right. Oh, intimate relationship. No matter what your sexual orientation, most people thrive. Most people eventually want a close, intimate relationship. Right? We're social beings. And so how do those develop? What kind of person you are, it depends on how that develops, right? So the most important piece of any relationship is communication, right? It's one of the big reasons that things fail. It's poor communication. Money's another. And not talking to each other, not knowing about each other, right? And then, of course, there is the abusive relationship. Domestic violence is way too prevalent in our society. Back in the day, right, you were told who you were going to marry. Your family arranged the marriage, right? You often for power and or money, right? There was dowries, right? People got paid. I'll let you marry my daughter because I'm the king, and if you pay me enough, your son can marry my daughter, and then he gains power that way, right? And later it moved into more in modern times. Of course, we like to think we marry for love. That's still not always the case. There are plenty of places where there's still arranged marriages. So, but here in the United States, we typically don't do that, but it does occur. Right? So, learning in chapter 1. Sorry. So, despite this slide, right, the same intimate relationship aspects apply to all couples. The stereotypes, right, are usually wrong, and in this case, they certainly are, right? Gay and lesbian relationships, intimate relationships, are looking for the same thing we're all looking for. What happens is you have a field of eligibles, right? Like you look around the classroom and you find that type of person attractive. That first of all, right? It's the physical piece, like, oh, I'm attracted to that person physically. Then, so that's a type for you. But then you need to learn to get to know that person and then see if that relationship can go forward, right? If your personalities then will match once you find each other physically attractive. Attractive people, or what we perceive as attractive people, right? Because that changes how we perceive whether in the old, there's a period of history where bigger people were found to be more attractive. Then there's thinner people who are more attractive. Then it's normal like-sized people that are found attractive. So all of that changes how we perceive it based on, of course, a lot has to do with television and advertising, on and on, right? But whatever we perceive as attractive, those people get an advantage in life. It's just the way it is. People are attracted to it, what they find attractive. So, right? Anyway, this is just a fact of life. Right, so this is right. How we should look. The media controls what we think we should look like. Right? And men actually overestimate their attractiveness and fail to see their flaws. It's like, oh, I'm shocked. Anyway, right? So, right, we always say, oh, how is that person matched up with that person, right? We tend to want to not oh, she's out of my league, he's out of my league, is a statement that used to be heard a lot. I don't know if it's so true anymore. I haven't been looking for anybody in a while. So there's a proximity effect, right? Like if that person is around a lot and I see them a lot, chances are it's easier to establish a relationship and then even amongst established relationships, long distance relationships are a struggle. Opposites attract. People who are involved with people that have the same attitude, interests, and personal characteristics. But opposites still do attract. I mean, if I don't know that I particularly want to live with myself, but we have to have certain goals. You want to have certain values, like you want to, if you're going to have children, if you're going to have a family, if your life goal is to just travel, right? So those are big things together. But for the most part, I personally don't want to live with myself. Flirting is how we begin to start a relationship, to see if there's any interest from the other side, etc. So, this is how a relationship builds. You start at somebody, you talk to somebody, right? You end up eventually touching somebody. And then you see if they reciprocate. Right? If there is no reciprocation, then you pretty much move on to the next relationship. I mean, unfortunately, that's not always true, but we'll talk about that at some other time. But for the most part, if we approach somebody and there's no reciprocation, then we move on. So our field of eligibles, right? We talked about, we typically look for somebody we believe is on the same level as us, right? Whether we are both at the same, scale of attractiveness, I guess, is the best way to put it. And then that moves into attitudes and values, etc. Right? Like you said, the closer the better. The more similar we are in certain aspects. So these are the three components of the theory of love, right? Intimacy, right? Beyond, once we get there, passion, and then commitment, the big word, right? That's what keeps a relationship going over time. Yeah, it's a bigger diagram, same thing. Combinations of the different aspects of the three. And then the 6 Styles of Love by John Lee. Oh. And here's a table, right? Tells you who you are, what type you are, and how you should match up, right? So, who you should be with. Basically, if you want to go along with this, you can pick a partner. Communication, right? This is a struggle. Let me tell you, this is the thing. And one of the biggest pieces of communication is about your sexual being, to make sure you are sexually compatible, to make sure you are able to discuss these things and work through these things, because relationships are hard and they take a hell of a lot of work. These are the things we do to each other as human beings. It doesn't matter if you love that person or not. We oftentimes do these things, right? So we, just keep working on it. It's not just with your partner. Communication is something you need to work on constantly anyway, but certainly in your relationship, because of the intimacy, because of the closeness, because of the time spent together, it just can be more challenging. And then here I said, like sexual communication, if we're not getting along sexually, the relationships have problems. Strategies for improving sexual orientation, right? So here's the 10 reasons why things don't work out for people, right? They haven't talked about it. They're unafraid. Their inability to express to their partner what it is they like or don't like sexually, and what they're willing to tolerate, etc. Low self-esteem and insecurity. If you can't bring a whole person to a relationship and you expect that person to fulfill you, then that's always a problem. Right? Of course, cheating, lying, right? Jealousy, all these things, and abusive relationships, which we're going to talk about. We have physical, verbal, or emotional abuse, right? You can hold somebody captive. You can beat somebody up emotionally. You can beat somebody up verbally. You don't always have to strike them physically. And here's the talk about how this happens and what happens in abusive relationships when these are the things that can occur. And this is how it does occur, right? How we get control of somebody, because that's basically what an abusive relationship is to have control. That's the only way that person is going to put up with that kind of abuse. It is very hard to leave a violent relationship. Some of us believe that violence is the way of love, right? If we're brought up in a household, so it's generational. If we're brought up in a household where violence is common, then we don't see that as wrong. As even negative attention is, some people find even negative attention to be better than no attention, right? All types of there's very deep psychological reasons why people then don't leave. And then, of course, there's financial reasons that people don't leave. And then abusers always work on you to convince you to come back. Things aren't going to happen again. That'll be different this time, etc., and on and on. And so people often leave the relationship and go back. It is very hard to move on and break away from somebody, especially if there's children involved, like all kinds of things. So at just touching the surface of abusive relationships, many people spend hours and hours in therapy because of abusive relationships. And it's a whole nother world. It's a whole nother topic. I mean, that could be a chapter at least all by itself. At any rate, again, if you read the chapters, do the chapters, quizzes, and your discussions. And as always, if you have any questions, I will be available. Email me or come to office hours. Thanks.